The massive space station Omega Prime hung in the darkness like a metal city among the stars. Ships from dozens of alien worlds docked at its ports every day. Today was different. Today the humans were sending their first representative to the Galactic Defense Council. Admiral Kekstar stood at the observation deck watching the small human transport ship approach. His blue-scaled skin rippled with nervous energy. The Veluxian had heard stories about humans. Terrible stories. These creatures from Earth had won battles that should have been impossible. They fought like demons and never gave up, even when facing certain death. They say humans are 7 feet tall with muscles like steel cables, whispered General Thalmer as he joined the Admiral. The reptilian alien's yellow eyes gleamed with curiosity and fear. Heard they can tear through metal. With their bare hands? Kekstar nodded grimly. The reports from the outer colonies were disturbing. Human soldiers had defeated armies 10 times their size. They used weapons that no one understood and tactics that defied all military logic. The Galactic Defense Council needed their help against the growing threat of the Nexer horde. But everyone was nervous about what kind of monster Earth would send as their ambassador. The transport ship docked with a soft thud that echoed through the station. Security teams took their positions, medical staff prepared for any biological hazards. Diplomatic translators checked their equipment one final time. Everyone held their breath. The airlock opened with a hiss of equalizing pressure. A small figure stepped through the doorway. Admiral Kekstar blinked his large eyes in confusion. Ow. General Thalmer's mouth fell open in surprise. The security teams looked at each other with puzzled expressions. The human was tiny. She barely reached 5 feet in height and looked like she weighed less than most alien children. Her black hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore plain civilian clothes that looked more suitable for a library than a military station. No armor, no weapons. No threatening appearance at all. She carried only a small travel bag and what appeared to be some kind of electronic tablet. Her steps were quiet and careful. She looked around the docking bay with wide, curious eyes like a student visiting a museum for the first time. "Excuse me," the human said in a soft, gentle voice. She approached the nearest security officer with a polite smile. "Could you please tell me which way to the guest quarters? I do not want to get lost." The Zephyrian guard stared down at her. In amazement? This creature was supposed to be one of the feared human warriors. She looked like she would have trouble lifting a heavy book, much less fighting in battle. "You were the human representative?" Admiral Kekstar asked as he approached. His voice carried doubt and confusion. "Yes, sir. I'm Dr. Una Kim from Earth's Scientific Advisory Council." She bowed slightly in a gesture of respect. "Thank you for allowing me to visit your beautiful station. I've read so much about the different species that work together here." General Thalmer exchanged glances with the Admiral. It had to be some kind of mistake. Earth's government must have sent the wrong person. Perhaps their real representative was still on the transport ship. "Are you traveling alone?" Thalmer asked carefully. "Oh no, sir. Commander Dayon Park is with me as my military escort." Una gestured toward the airlock where a tall human in a dark uniform was speaking with the docking officers. "He handles all the security matters so I can focus on my research." Commander Park looked more like what they had expected from humans. He was tall and broad-shouldered with alert eyes that seemed to take in every detail of his surroundings. His uniform was clean and professional, but showed signs of real combat experience. When he moved, it was with the fluid grace of a trained warrior. But even he seemed relaxed and friendly as he completed the arrival procedures. He smiled at the alien dock workers and thanked them politely for their assistance. This was not the behavior of savage monsters that the stories described. "Research?" Admiral Kekstar asked Dr. Kim. "What kind of research brings you to Omega Prime?" Una's face lit up with enthusiasm. "I study how different life forms adapt to new environments. Your station brings together species from so many different worlds. I am particularly interested in your botanical gardens. I heard you have plant samples from over 200 different planets." She pulled out her tablet and showed them images of various alien plants. Her notes were written in neat handwriting with detailed observations about growth patterns and environmental needs. Everything about her suggested a dedicated scientist who spent more time with books than people. I hope I can visit the gardens. During my stay, she continued, I brought some seeds from Earth that might interest your botanists. Perhaps we could arrange some kind of cultural exchange. The security team began to relax. Several guards actually smiled at the small humans. Obvious excitement about plants. This was clearly not a threat to anyone. Commander Park finished his paperwork and joined them. Dr. Kim tends to get very excited about her work, he said with an amused expression. I hope she will not be too much trouble during our visit. Trouble? General Thumer almost laughed. I think we were expecting something quite different from Earth's first representative. Different how? Una asked with innocent curiosity. The aliens looked at each other awkwardly. They could hardly explain that. They'd expected a terrifying warrior based on the stories of human military victories. We had heard that humans were very formidable in battle, Admiral Kekstar said carefully. Una nodded seriously. Oh yes, the humans can be very determined when we need to protect something important, but most of us prefer peaceful solutions when possible. I believe that understanding each other is always better than fighting. She gestured around the station with obvious admiration. This place is a perfect example. So many different species working together for the common good. Gives me hope that we can solve any problem through cooperation and shared knowledge. Commander Park watched the alien leaders with careful eyes but said nothing. His role was to protect Dr. Kim and observe. He had his orders and intended to follow them exactly. Well then, Admiral Kekstar said finally. Let us show you to your quarters. The botanical gardens are on level 7 if you would like to visit them later. Thank you so much, Una replied with genuine gratitude. I am sure this will be a wonderful learning experience for everyone. As they walked through the corridors of Omega Prime, alien civilians and military personnel stopped to stare at the small human scientist. Word spread quickly through the station's communication networks. Had sent a botanist. A tiny female researcher who asked polite questions about plants and seemed genuinely thrilled to be learning about alien cultures. The tension that had gripped the station for weeks began to fade. Perhaps the humans were not as dangerous as everyone believed. Perhaps the stories had been exaggerated. Perhaps this diplomatic mission would proceed without any drama or complications. Admiral Kekstar and General Elmore felt much more confident as they showed their guests to their assigned quarters. They had been worried about nothing. Dr. Una Kim was clearly harmless. They had no idea how wrong they were. 3 days had passed since Dr. Una Kim arrived at Omega Prime. The small human scientist had quickly become a familiar sight throughout the massive space station. She could be found in different sections each day, always carrying her tablet and taking careful notes about everything she observed. The botanical gardens on level 7 had become her favorite destination. Una spent hours among the alien plants, photographing leaves and flowers with the wonder of a child discovering magic for the first time. The Sylvanian gardeners who maintained the facility had grown fond of her gentle manner and endless questions about their work. This purple moss from Kepler 9 is fascinating, Una told groundskeeper Velian as she knelt beside a glowing patch of vegetation. How does it process nitrogen in such low atmospheric pressure? The tall, plant-like alien swayed his branches thoughtfully. The moss has developed special root chambers that concentrate atmospheric gases. It's very efficient for survival in harsh conditions. Una made notes on her tablet with quick, precise movements. And the Terran plants we brought? How are they adapting to your soil mixture? Remarkably well, Velian replied with what might have been surprise. Your earth seeds seem very adaptable. They are growing faster than we expected and showing unusual resistance to environmental changes. Life finds a way, Una said softly, her eyes still focused on the plants around her. Every species develops the tools it needs to survive. Commander Dayon Park watched this exchange from the garden entrance. He had been observing Una's activities for 3 days now, and he was beginning to see patterns that the aliens missed completely. Her questions were never random. Every conversation served a purpose that went far beyond simple scientific curiosity. Later that morning, Una visited the Environmental Control Center on level 12. The technicians there were happy to show her how the station maintained breathable atmosphere for dozens of different species. She asked about backup systems and redundancy protocols with the enthusiasm of someone planning to write a research paper. We have independent air processors for each sector, explained Chief Engineer Korax, a six-armed creature from the Helix Nebula. If one system fails, the others can compensate until repairs are completed. How interesting, Una said, making more notes. And the atmospheric composition sensors? They must be very sensitive to detect problems before they become dangerous. Oh yes. We can identify trace elements down to parts per billion, essential for maintaining proper breathing mixtures. For everyone aboard, Una nodded approvingly. Safety first. I imagine you also monitor for biological contaminants? Things like spores or pollen that might cause allergic reactions? Absolutely. The filtration systems are designed to catch even microscopic particles. Wonderful. It makes me feel much safer knowing how well protected we all are. Commander Park made his own mental notes as he listened. Una was learning everything about the station's life support systems, while appearing to be concerned only about her own comfort and safety. The aliens saw a nervous scientist asking reasonable questions. Park saw something entirely different. In the afternoon, Una attended a cultural exchange meeting in the main conference room. Representatives from various species had gathered to share information about their homeworlds and traditions. The human scientists listened politely to each presentation and asked thoughtful questions that made everyone feel appreciated. The crystalline formations on Arcturus 7 sound beautiful, she told the lithoid delegate. Do your people require specific mineral supplements in your diet to maintain health? Yes, indeed. We must consume iron-rich compounds every few days, or our molecular structure begins to weaken. I suppose different regions of your planet have different mineral compositions. That must create interesting dietary variations between your various communities. The lithoid seemed pleased by her interest. Exactly right. Eastern Arcturus 7 has much higher copper content, so our people there have developed different metabolic pathways. Una made careful notes about every species' biological needs and vulnerabilities. She learned about the Aquarians' dependence on high humidity, the Solari's need for specific light wavelengths, and the Nebulan's sensitivity to electromagnetic fields. Each piece of information was gathered with genuine warmth and curiosity that made her subjects eager to share more details. Commander Park observed how she remembered every name and personal detail that was mentioned. When the crystalline delegate mentioned having a daughter studying off-world, Una asked follow-up questions about the girl's studies and expressed hope that they would be reunited soon. When the Aquarian representative complained about the station's dry air, she offered suggestions about humidifying devices she had seen in the botanical gardens. Everyone left the meeting feeling that Dr. Unikim was the most considerate and caring person they had met in years. That evening, a minor crisis erupted in the diplomatic quarters. The Helix Consortium and the Spiral Alliance had gotten into a heated argument about resource allocation. For the upcoming defense preparations, both groups claimed they needed priority access to the station's manufacturing facilities to produce equipment for their fleets. The argument had escalated to the point where both sides were threatening to withdraw from the Defense Alliance entirely. Admiral Kekstar and General Thulmer were desperately trying to find a solution that would satisfy both parties. Dr. Unikim happened to be passing through the diplomatic sector when she noticed the commotion. She approached Commander Park with a concerned expression. Is everything all right? Everyone seems very upset about something. Park explained the situation briefly. The two allied factions needed the same resources at the same time, and there was no way to give both groups what they wanted without delaying the entire defense preparation schedule. Una listened thoughtfully, occasionally asking quiet questions about the technical requirements each group needed. After a few minutes, she approached Admiral Kekstar with a hesitant suggestion. Excuse me, sir. I could not help but overhear the discussion. I am just a scientist, but I wondered if there might be a simple solution that everyone has overlooked. Admiral looked skeptical but desperate enough to listen to anyone. What did you have in mind, Dr. Kim? Well, the Helix Consortium needs manufacturing time to produce their shield generators, and the Spiral Alliance needs the same facilities to build their weapon systems. But I noticed that the shield generators use completely different materials than the weapons. What if you ran both production lines simultaneously using separate resource streams? She pulled out her tablet and showed them a quick diagram she had sketched. The helix generators require crystalline matrices and energy conduits. The spiral weapons need metallic alloys and chemical explosives. There is no overlap in the supply chains. You could literally build both sets of equipment at the same time without any resource conflicts. Admiral Kekstar stared at the diagram in amazement. Lummer checked the technical specifications and confirmed that the human was absolutely right. It was such an obvious solution that everyone had missed it completely. Within an hour, both factions had agreed to the shared production schedule. The crisis was resolved, and the defense preparations could continue on time. Both groups praised Dr. Kim's brilliant insight and quick thinking. Just a simple observation, Yuna said modestly. Sometimes an outside perspective can help see solutions that are hidden in plain sight. As the various delegates dispersed to their quarters, Commander Park walked beside Yuna through the quiet corridors. He had watched her resolve a major diplomatic crisis with the same gentle manner she used to discuss plant biology. She had made it look effortless. Interesting day, he commented carefully. Yuna smiled at him with the same innocent expression she had worn since arriving at the station. I love learning about how different species approach problems. Everyone has such unique perspectives on the world. Park nodded but said nothing more. His orders were clear. Observe and protect. Do not interfere with Dr. Kim's activities unless she was in immediate danger. He was beginning to understand why those orders existed. Far across the galaxy, emergency communications were being transmitted between various military commands. Nexer Horde had been detected moving toward the Outer Rim territories. Intelligence reports suggested they would reach the Omega Prime sector within 2 weeks. Admiral Kekstar received the news with growing dread. The Nexer machines had never been defeated in direct combat. Every world they attacked fell within days. The combined fleets of the Galactic Defense Council would barely slow them down, but at least they had time to prepare their defenses, and perhaps the humans would prove as formidable in battle as the stories claimed. He had no idea that their most dangerous weapon was already aboard his station. It's asking innocent questions about flowers and making friends with everyone she met. The emergency meeting was called at 0800 hours station time. Admiral Kekstar stood at the head of the massive conference table, his blue scales darker than usual with stress. Representatives from 12 different species filled the seats around him. The holographic displays showed star charts with red warning symbols, spreading across the Outer Rim territories like a deadly infection. The situation has become critical, Admiral Kekstar announced to the assembled military leaders. Long-range sensors have confirmed our worst fears. The Nexer Horde is moving toward our sector faster than predicted. General Thulmer activated the main display screen. Latest intelligence reports show a fleet of over 10,000 machine ships. They destroyed the Kepler defense station yesterday. Complete annihilation in less than 6 hours. Worried murmurs filled the conference room. The Kepler defense station had been considered impregnable. Shield generators could withstand the combined firepower of an entire battle fleet. The automated defense systems could track and destroy thousands of incoming missiles simultaneously. If the Nexer machines could crush such defenses so easily, what hope did Omega Prime have? What about reinforcements? Asked Commander Zeltix of the Centauri fleet. Can we get additional ships from the inner systems before they arrive? Negative, Thulmer replied grimly. The closest battle groups are defending the core worlds. We cannot expect significant reinforcements for at least 3 weeks. The Nexer will be here in 10 days. The room fell silent. Everyone understood the mathematics of their situation. Combined defensive fleet at Omega Prime consisted of fewer than 2,000 ships. They were outnumbered 5-1 by an enemy that had never lost a single battle. There must be something we can do, insisted Admiral Vorthon of the Crystal Empire. Some tactic or strategy that the Nexer have not encountered before. We have studied every engagement the machines have fought, General Thulmer said with frustration in his voice. They adapt to every weapon we use, so they learn from every tactic we try. Each battle makes them stronger and smarter. Admiral Kekstar paced back and forth at the front of the room. His mind raced through possibilities, but every scenario ended in defeat. The Nexer horde was simply too powerful and too intelligent to overcome with conventional warfare. Soft chime indicated an incoming priority transmission. The communication officer checked his console and looked up with surprise. "Admiral, we have an encrypted message from Earth Command. Maximum security clearance required." Kekstar felt a small spark of hope. Perhaps the humans had developed some new weapon or strategy that could help in the coming battle. He had been impressed by Dr. Kim's problem-solving abilities during the diplomatic crisis. Maybe her people had similar insights about military matters. "Transfer it to my private console," he ordered. The other military leaders watched as Admiral Kekstar entered his security codes and opened the encrypted file. They expected to see technical specifications for human weapons or perhaps offers of military assistance. Instead, they saw the Admiral's confident expression transform into something that looked like absolute terror. His hands began to shake. His blue scales turned pale gray. He stared at the message for several long seconds without saying a word. Admiral General Thulmer said with concern, "What does the message say?" Kekstar looked up at his colleagues with wide, frightened eyes. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Orchid has been activated. Recommend immediate tactical withdrawal from all forward positions. Earth assumes operational command of the defense." The conference room erupted in confused voices. Some commanders demanded explanations. Others asked about the meaning of the code name. Several species representatives began arguing about whether humans should be allowed to take command of their forces. "Who is Ghost Orchid?" General Thulmer asked loudly over the noise. "Admiral." Kekstar's hands were still shaking as he accessed the station's personnel records. He typed in a search query and waited for the results to appear on the main screen. Dr. Yuna Kim, human female. Age 28, xenobiologist and cultural researcher. Current location, Botanical Gardens, Level 7. The room fell completely silent. "That cannot be correct," Commander Zeltic said in disbelief. "The human scientist? She studies plants and asks questions about our food preferences." Admiral Kekstar was already pulling up classified intelligence files that required his highest security clearance to access. What he found made his blood run cold. The first file was labeled Operation Silent Garden Kepler, 442 system. The report described how a heavily defended enemy stronghold had been eliminated without a single shot being fired. An entire fleet of hostile ships had simply vanished from their orbital positions. No distress signals, no evidence of battle, no survivors. The enemy had disappeared as if they had never existed. The tactical analysis was signed by one Dr. Y. Kim, Strategic Advisory Division, Earth Command. The second file detailed the liberation of New Geneva. A human colonial world had been occupied by aggressive invaders for over 2 years. The enemy had built massive fortifications and stationed over 50,000 troops on the planet's surface. Earth Command had declared the world impossible to retake without unacceptable casualties. Then something changed. Within 6 hours, the entire enemy occupation force had surrendered unconditionally. They claimed their weapons had stopped working and their supply lines had completely collapsed. The official report described the victory as biological warfare conducted through environmental manipulation. Again, the operation had been planned and executed by Dr. Y. Kim. The third file was even more disturbing. The Battle of the Void Gate had been humanity's darkest hour. Earth's entire defensive fleet had been trapped in an impossible tactical situation. Enemy forces surrounded them on all sides with overwhelming firepower, military analysts estimated. The human fleet would be destroyed within hours, leaving Earth defenseless. Instead, the enemy fleet had been completely annihilated. The official report was mostly classified, but the summary indicated that ambient space debris had somehow been weaponized to create a cascade effect that destroyed over 3,000 enemy ships simultaneously. The phenomenon had never been observed before or since. The architect of this impossible victory was listed as Dr. Y. Kim, Special Projects Division. General Thulmer read the files with growing amazement and horror. She has done all this. A small human who asks about our atmospheric preferences and grows flowers in the garden. There are 17 other classified operations, Admiral Kekstar said in a hollow voice. All successful, all planned by the same person. The intelligence files describe her as the most dangerous tactical mind in known space. Commander Zeltix laughed nervously. Surely this is some kind of mistake. We've been watching her for over a week. She spends her time with plants and asks innocent questions about our cultures. She resolved our diplomatic dispute with a simple suggestion about resource sharing. That is exactly what makes her so dangerous, Admiral Kekstar realized. With growing dread, she has been studying us, learning our weaknesses, understanding our systems and our biology. We thought she was a harmless scientist conducting research. She was conducting research, General Thelmer said quietly. Research on us. The military leaders looked at each other with dawning comprehension. Dr. Yuna, Kim had been walking freely through their most secure facility for over a week. She had asked questions about their life support systems, their defensive capabilities, their biological needs, and their psychological vulnerabilities. They had answered every question willingly because she seemed so genuinely interested in learning about their cultures. Where is she now? Admiral Kekstar asked urgently. The communication officer checked the internal tracking system. Botanical Gardens, Level 7. She has been there for the past 3 hours working with the Terran plant samples. And Commander Park? Security Office, Level 4. He is reviewing station defense protocols with our tactical staff, Admiral. Kekstar felt a chill run through his entire body. The human military officer was studying their defensive systems, while the woman known as Ghost Orchid was working with biological materials in an environment that connected directly to the stations. Atmospheric processing systems. We need to evacuate the station immediately, he said. Evacuate? General Tholmer looked confused. Why, the Nexer horde is still 10 days away. Because, Admiral Kekstar said grimly, we have been harboring the most dangerous weapon in known space, and she has had over a week to prepare whatever she is planning to do. He looked around the conference table at his fellow commanders. Every species that has ever fought against Ghost Orchid has learned the same lesson too late. She does not win battles by being stronger or faster than her enemies. Then how does she'll win? Commander Zeltix asked. Admiral Kekstar pulled up the final classified file. It was a psychological profile prepared by Earth Command's own intelligence division. The summary was brief but terrifying. Subject exhibits unprecedented ability to identify and exploit systemic vulnerabilities in complex operational environments. Tactical approach focuses on cascade failure theory, the identification of single critical points whose disruption can cause total system collapse. Recommend extreme caution when engaging subject in any operational capacity. She wins, Admiral, Kekstar said slowly, by understanding how everything connects to everything else. And then she changes one small thing that makes everything fall apart. In the Botanical Gardens 7 levels below, Dr. Unikim continued her gentle work among the alien plants. She hummed softly to herself as she tended the growing specimens, occasionally making notes on her tablet about their progress. To anyone watching, she looked exactly like what she claimed to be, a dedicated scientist who loved learning about life in all its forms, but her eyes held a different story. They were the eyes of someone who saw patterns and connections that others missed completely. They were the eyes of someone who had never lost a battle, because she understood that every war was really just a question of finding the right pressure point. The Nexer horde was coming, and Ghost Orchid was ready for them. Commander Dayon Park stood alone in his quarters, staring at the photograph on his desk. The image showed a younger version of himself and Dr. Unikim, standing together in front of a memorial wall on Earth. They were both wearing black formal uniforms, and Yuna was placing white flowers at the base of the monument. The memorial honored the victims of the Harmony Colony massacre. 3,000 human civilians had died that day when alien raiders attacked the peaceful farming settlement. Had been 12 years old when she watched her home world burn from the observation deck of an evacuation ship, Park remembered that day clearly. He had been a young military cadet assigned to refugee processing duties. Most of the survivors had been angry, demanding immediate military action against the aliens who destroyed their lives. They wanted revenge. They wanted blood. Wanted the enemy to suffer as much as they had suffered. but not Yuna Kim. The small girl had sat quietly in the refugee center, reading every book she could find about alien biology and planetary ecosystems. When the military counselors asked what she wanted to do when she grew up, she had given an answer that surprised everyone. "I want to study life," she had said in her soft child's voice. "I want to understand how everything connects together." Park had followed her career over the years that followed. While other Harmony survivors joined the military or demanded aggressive policies against alien species, Yuna chose a different path. She earned advanced degrees in xenobiology, environmental science, and ecological systems theory. Her doctoral dissertation was titled Symbiotic Warfare: Military Applications of Biological Interdependence. The paper had caught the attention of Earth's Strategic Command within hours of publication. Military analysts realized that Dr. Kim was not just studying alien life forms, she was studying how to defeat them using their own biological needs. Against them, Park's personal communicator chimed with an incoming message. It was a priority transmission from Earth Command, encrypted with the highest security protocols. He entered his access codes and read the contents. The message was a detailed briefing about Yuna's previous operations. Park had security clearance to know the basic facts, but this file contained information that even he had never seen before. The siege of Kepler 442 had been Yuna's first major operation. Enemy forces had established a supposedly impregnable base on an asteroid in the outer system. Their shields could repel any weapon attack, and their location made conventional assault impossible. Yuna had studied the enemy's supply records and discovered they were importing a specific type of algae to supplement their food production systems. She had arranged for Earth traders to sell them a slightly modified version of the same algae. The genetic changes were so small that standard biological scanners could not detect them. The modified algae had produced a chemical compound that was completely harmless to most life forms, but it was deadly to the specific bacteria that the enemy species used for digestion. Within 2 weeks, the entire enemy garrison had died from what appeared to be a natural plague. No shots were fired, no battles were fought. The enemy simply vanished. The liberation of New Geneva had been even more subtle. Occupying forces had been heavily armed and well supplied, making direct military action impossible without massive casualties. Yuna had spent months studying the enemy's psychology and cultural patterns. She discovered that the alien species had a deep religious reverence for certain types of crystalline formations. Their entire social structure was built around the belief that these crystals contained the spirits of their ancestors. Yuna had arranged for mining equipment to accidentally discover a large deposit of the sacred crystals beneath the main enemy base. The aliens had immediately ceased all military operations. To protect the holy site, they had withdrawn their forces to establish a protective perimeter around the crystals, leaving the human cities undefended. Earth forces had retaken the entire planet without firing a single shot. The enemy had surrendered peacefully rather than risk damaging what they believed were the resting places of their ancestors. They never learned that the crystals were artificial, grown in Earth laboratories using techniques Yuna had developed from studying their religious texts. The Battle of the Void Gate had been her masterpiece. Earth's fleet had been trapped in an impossible tactical situation surrounded by overwhelming enemy forces. Conventional weapons were useless against the enemy's adaptive shields. Retreat was impossible. Yuna had noticed that the battle was taking place in a region of space with unusually high concentrations of cosmic dust and metallic debris. Most military strategists considered such materials to be environmental hazards that complicated navigation and targeting systems. But Yuna saw something different. She saw a weapon. She had calculated that a precisely timed series of electromagnetic pulses could create a static charge in the metallic debris. The charged particles would be attracted to the enemy ship's hull plating, which contained trace amounts of magnetized alloys. Under normal circumstances, this would create minor electrical interference, but Yuna had also discovered that the enemy's power systems used a specific type of crystalline energy core that was extremely sensitive to electromagnetic disruption. When thousands of charged particles struck their hulls simultaneously, the feedback had caused cascade failures throughout their entire fleet. Over 3,000 Enemy ships had been destroyed in less than 10 minutes. The phenomenon had appeared completely natural, like a cosmic storm that happened to occur at exactly the right moment. Only Yuna had known that storms could be guided by those who understood the hidden connections between all things. Park closed the files and walked to his window. Through the transparent aluminum, he could see the botanical gardens where Yuna was still working among her plants. She looked exactly like what she claimed to be, a gentle scientist who loved studying life in all its forms, but Park knew the truth behind her gentle facade. Yuna Kim had never forgotten the day her colony burned. She had simply chosen to honor the dead by ensuring that no one else would have to watch their homeworld die. Her methods were not driven by anger or hatred. They were driven by something far more dangerous, a complete understanding of how life and death were connected in ways that most people never imagined. Park's communicator chimed again. This time the message was from Yuna herself. Dayon, could you please join me in the botanical gardens? Have something I want to show you. Park smiled despite the gravity of their situation. He had seen that tone in her messages before. Meant that Ghost Orchid had found her pressure point. The Nexer horde was still 7 days away. But Park suspected the battle had already begun. Most people thought war started when the first shots were fired. Yuna had taught him that real wars were won or lost, long before anyone realized they were fighting. He made his way through the corridors of Omega Prime toward the botanical gardens. Around him, alien crew members went about their duties with growing nervousness about the approaching enemy fleet. They had no idea that their salvation was quietly working among the flowers and vegetables. 7 levels below. When Park arrived at the gardens, he found Yuna kneeling beside a collection of small potted plants. She was wearing the same simple, civilian clothes she had worn since arriving at the station. Her hands were dirty from working in the soil, and she had a smudge of earth on her cheek. "Look at this," she said with genuine excitement, pointing to one of the plants. "The Terran seeds are adapting even faster than I expected. They are already beginning to hybridize with the local specimens." Park looked at the plants but saw nothing unusual. They appeared to be ordinary flowers and vegetables, the kind that might grow in any garden anywhere in the galaxy. "What am I looking at?" he asked. Yuna smiled at him with the same innocent expression she had worn since childhood, but her eyes held depths that most people never saw. They were the eyes of someone who had learned to see patterns and connections that others missed completely. "Life," she said simply. "Life finding a way to survive and thrive in any environment." She stood up and brushed the dirt from her hands. "The Nexer machines think they understand biological systems because they have conquered worlds with organic populations. But they have never encountered Earth biology before." "What makes Earth biology special?" Park asked, though he suspected. He already knew the answer. "We learn to adapt," Yuna replied. "Every species on Earth has spent millions of years learning to survive in changing conditions. We develop genetic flexibility that most other worlds never needed." She gestured toward the hybrid plants growing in the alien soil. These little flowers contain the genetic heritage of a world that never gave up. They carry the memory of every challenge life has faced and overcome. Park understood. The Nexer horde was about to learn why Ghost Orchid had never lost a battle. They were about to discover that some flowers had very sharp thorns. "How long do you need?" he asked. "The preparations are already complete," Yuna said gently. "We just wait for our guests to arrive." The depths of space, the Nexer horde continued its inexorable advance toward Omega Prime. The machine intelligence that controlled the fleet was already analyzing the defensive capabilities of the space station and planning the most efficient methods of conquest. It never occurred. The Nexer horde dropped out of hyperspace at exactly 13:47 hours station time. Long-range sensors detected the massive fleet while it was still 3 hours away from Omega Prime. The numbers were worse than anyone had feared. 15,000 ships, reported the sensor technician with barely controlled panic in his voice. Multiple Dreadnought-class vessels detected. They are maintaining perfect formation and advancing at steady velocity. Admiral Kekstar stared at the tactical display with growing dread. Each red dot on the screen represented a machine intelligence capable of destroying entire worlds. The combined fleet defending Omega Prime looked pathetically small in comparison. All defensive units, assume battle stations, he ordered. Activate emergency protocols. Begin civilian evacuation procedures. Throughout the massive space station, alarm sirens began to wail. Thousands of non-essential personnel rushed toward the evacuation ships docked at the outer rings. Military units took their positions at weapon emplacements and shield generators. Everyone knew they were about to witness either a miracle or a massacre. General Thilmer approached the Admiral with a grim expression. Our tactical computers have run every possible scenario. We can delay their advance for approximately 4 hours before our defenses are completely overwhelmed. 4 hours, Kekstar repeated hollowly, against 15,000 ships. The evacuation will require at least 6 hours to complete, Thilmer continued. We will have to sacrifice the station to buy time for the civilian transports to escape. Kekstar nodded grimly. It was the only logical choice. Omega Prime was doomed, but perhaps they could save some lives before the end came. His contemplation was interrupted by a soft voice behind him. Admiral, could I have permission to make an announcement to the station? Both military leaders turned to see Dr. Yuna Kim standing quietly at the entrance to the command center.
Ow.
She was still wearing her simple civilian clothes, but something about her presence seemed different. Her gentle demeanor remained unchanged, but there was a quality in her eyes that had not been there before. Dr. Kim, Admiral Kekstar said with surprise, "You should be with the evacuation groups. The first transport ships are already departing." "Am not leaving," Yuna replied calmly. "Earth Command has given me operational authority for this engagement. I need to address the station personnel before the Nexer arrive." General Thilmer looked skeptical. "What could you possibly tell them that would make any difference? We are facing impossible odds." Yuna smiled with the same gentle expression she had worn since arriving at Omega Prime. "I want to tell them about gardening." The two alien commanders exchanged glances. The stress of the approaching battle had obviously affected the human scientist's mental state. She was talking about plants, while enemy dreadnoughts approached with enough firepower to crack a moon. Dr. Kim, Admiral Kekstar said carefully, "Perhaps you should speak with our medical staff. The approaching battle can be very stressful for civilians." "I am fine, Admiral. But I do need access to the station's communication systems and the agricultural bay facilities." Something in her tone made Kekstar hesitate. Despite her innocent appearance, this was Ghost Orchid speaking, the woman who had never lost a battle. The tactical mind that had destroyed entire enemy fleets without firing a shot. "What do you need?" "What?" "Access to the atmospheric control systems and samples of seeds from every world represented in our alliance. The more diverse, the better." General Thilmer looked confused. "Seeds? What possible military application could plant seeds have against machine intelligences?" Yuna's smile never wavered, but her eyes showed depths that made the general suddenly uncomfortable. "Life finds a way, General, even in the most hostile environments." 2 hours later, Dr. Yuna Kim stood in the agricultural bay surrounded by hundreds of small containers filled with seeds from dozens of different worlds. The Veluxian sunflower seeds that grew in high radiation environments, crystalline moss, spores from the frozen moons of Arcturus, helix vine seeds that could survive in pure methane atmospheres. And scattered throughout the collection were seeds from Earth. Simple flowers and vegetables that looked unremarkable compared to the exotic alien specimens. But Yuna knew something about Earth's plants that the galaxy had never learned. They were survivors. Every plant on Earth had evolved in one of the most competitive and dangerous ecosystems in known space. They had learned to adapt to changing conditions, to compete with aggressive neighbors, and to develop chemical defenses against threats that most worlds never faced. Yuna began her work with the same gentle care she had shown throughout her stay. She planted the seeds in carefully prepared soil mixtures, arranged them in specific patterns that seemed random to casual observers, and began introducing them into the station's atmospheric systems through the environmental processors. Commander Park watched from the observation gallery above the agricultural bay. He'd seen Yuna work like this before, always with the same quiet intensity that suggested she was conducting a symphony only she could hear. The Nexer fleet has reached scanning range, he reported through his communicator. They are conducting detailed analysis of our defensive capabilities. Perfect. Una replied without looking up from her work. Tell Admiral Kekstar to make sure all our biological readings are being transmitted on open frequencies. The Nexer need to understand exactly what kind of life forms they are dealing with. Park relayed the message, though he was certain the Admiral would think both humans had lost their minds. Conventional military wisdom said to hide your capabilities from the enemy, not broadcast them openly. But Ghost Orchid had never followed conventional wisdom. 1 hour later, the Nexer fleet had moved into close range and begun their final approach. The machine intelligences were conducting intensive scans of Omega Prime, analyzing every defensive system and cataloging every life form aboard the station. Their sensors detected the usual mixture of alien species they had encountered on other worlds. Biluxians with their silicon-based biology, Quarians with their liquid cellular structure, crystalline beings from the Outer Rim territories. All species that the Nexer had successfully conquered in previous campaigns. But their sensors also detected something new. Biological signatures that did not match any known species in their extensive databases. The readings indicated carbon-based life forms with unusual genetic flexibility and adaptive capabilities. The Nexer machine intelligence designated these unknown organisms as potential threats requiring detailed analysis. Their programming included protocols for adapting to any biological weapon system they encountered. They began preparing countermeasures based on the genetic data they were collecting. This was exactly what Una had been waiting for. Admiral, she called through the communication system, please begin releasing the atmospheric samples into space around the station. Make it look like we are trying to clear our air systems before the battle. Admiral Kekstar stared at his tactical display in amazement. The small human scientist was asking him to vent their life support reserves into the vacuum of space. It seemed like madness. But his intelligence files reminded him that Ghost Orchid's methods had never made sense to conventional military thinking. He gave the order. Thousands of cubic meters of processed atmosphere began venting from Omega Prime's environmental systems. To the Nexer scanners, it appeared that the station was purging contaminated air in preparation for battle. The machine intelligences detected trace amounts of biological material in the vented atmosphere and began analyzing the genetic structures. They found pollen, spores, microscopic plant matter from dozens of different worlds. The Nexer computers cataloged each sample and began developing countermeasures for the biological agents they might represent. But buried within the familiar alien genetic patterns were sequences the machines had never encountered before. Earth biology was entering their systems through their own scanning processes, and their adaptive programming was trying to incorporate it into their defensive matrices. The Nexer had no way of knowing that Earth plants had spent millions of years developing chemical weapons far more sophisticated than anything most worlds had ever produced. They were about to learn that some flowers were more dangerous than any weapon ever built. Dr. Una Kim stood quietly in the agricultural bay, watching the readouts from the atmospheric venting systems. Around her, the hybrid plants she had created were already beginning to release their own genetic material into the station's air supply. How much longer? Commander Park asked. The process has already started, Una replied gently. The Nexer machines think they are analyzing potential biological weapons. They have no idea they are installing their own destruction, she touched. One of the small earth flowers growing in an alien soil mixture. Every ecosystem has a balance. The Nexer have spent so long conquering biological worlds that they have learned to incorporate organic systems into their technology. And that makes them vulnerable? Una's smile held depths that made Park remember why enemy generals feared the mention of her name. That makes them part of the ecosystem. And ecosystems can be changed by introducing the right new elements. In the depths of space, the Nexer fleet continued its final approach toward Omega Prime. The machine intelligences were confident in their analysis of the station's defenses. They had encountered biological weapons before and had developed appropriate countermeasures. They had no way of knowing that they were about to encounter biology that had learned to fight back. The final assault began at 1847 hours station time. Nexer Horde moved into attack formation with the precision of a vast mechanical orchestra. 15,000 ships arranged themselves in perfect geometric patterns around Omega Prime there. Weapons charging with energy signatures that could be detected across half the solar system. Admiral Kekstar watched the tactical display with the grim acceptance of someone watching his own execution. The Nexer dreadnoughts alone possessed enough firepower to reduce the space station to atomic particles. The smaller ships could overwhelm any defensive system known to galactic civilization. All weapon systems prepare to engage, he ordered with as much dignity as he could manage. All personnel, prepare for final defensive action. The first wave of Nexer ships opened fire with devastating efficiency. Plasma beams and particle weapons struck Omega Prime's shields in a coordinated barrage that lit up the darkness of space, like a miniature star. The station's defensive systems responded automatically, returning fire with everything they possessed. It was like throwing stones at a hurricane. The Nexer ships absorbed the counterattack without noticeable effect. Their adaptive shields analyzed each weapon signature and adjusted their defensive frequencies accordingly. Within minutes, the station's most powerful weapons had become completely ineffective. But something strange was happening within the Nexer fleet, deep inside the machine intelligences that controlled each ship. Biological analysis programs were working frantically to process the genetic data they had collected from Omega Prime's atmospheric venting. The computers had identified thousands of different plant species and were attempting to develop countermeasures for each potential biological threat. This process required the machines to essentially simulate the biological functions of each organism within their own systems. They created virtual models of plant cellular structures, genetic replication processes, and chemical production mechanisms. It was the only way their programming could understand how to defend against biological weapons. What the Nexer did not realize was that they were essentially giving Earth biology a foothold inside their own networks. Dr. Yuna Kim stood in the agricultural bay, watching readouts that would have been meaningless to most observers. But she could see the patterns forming in the data streams. The genetic viruses she had hidden within the Earth, plant samples were beginning to propagate through the Nexer computer networks. Status report? Commander Park asked quietly. The infection vectors are establishing themselves within their primary systems, Yuna replied with the same gentle tone she used to discuss flower care. The Nexer machines are trying to understand Earth biology by incorporating it into their own programming. And that is a mistake? Yuna smiled as she watched another indicator light change from red to green on her monitoring console. Earth plants learned to survive on a world where everything was trying to kill them. They developed chemical defenses that most species never needed. She gestured toward the hybrid specimens growing around them. These little flowers contain genetic instructions for producing compounds that disrupt neural pathways in organic systems. The Nexer use biological components to interface with the worlds they conquer. Their computers are trying to simulate those same neural pathways to understand our plants. So they are poisoning themselves, in a manner of speaking. But it is more subtle than that. The genetic viruses are not destroying their systems directly. They're changing how their systems function. On the tactical display, Admiral Kekstar noticed the first signs that something unusual was happening. Several Nexer ships had stopped firing and appeared to be running internal diagnostics. Their formation patterns were becoming less precise, and some vessels seemed to be drifting out of position. What is happening to their fleet? General Thelmer asked with confusion. Before anyone could answer, one of the Nexer dreadnoughts suddenly fired on its own escort ships. The massive plasma beam tore through 3 smaller vessels before the weapon systems shut down automatically. The other ships in the formation immediately moved away from the malfunctioning dreadnought, their own weapons targeting their former companion. They are fighting each other, the sensor technician reported with amazement. Multiple ships are engaging in combat with their own fleet elements. More Nexer vessels began displaying erratic behavior. Some ships fired randomly at empty space. Others began broadcasting contradictory signals to their fleet companions. Several dreadnoughts simply stopped responding to commands and drifted away from the main formation, in the depths of the Nexer network. The genetic viruses were wreaking havoc on the machine intelligences. The computers had attempted to understand Earth biology by simulating plant cellular processes within their own systems. But Earth's plants had evolved chemical compounds, specifically designed to disrupt the type of organic neural networks that the Nexer used. The machines were not being destroyed. They were being confused. Their learning algorithms were trapped in recursive loops, trying to process biological data that their systems could not properly interpret. The genetic instructions from Earth plants were causing cascade failures throughout their collective intelligence network. Even worse, the Nexer had shared the biological data throughout their entire fleet to ensure coordinated defense against potential bioweapons. This meant that every ship in the Horde was simultaneously experiencing the same system failures. Within 2 hours, the mighty Nexer fleet had transformed from an unstoppable military force into a collection of confused and isolated machines fighting their own programming. Ships drifted away from their formations. Communication networks failed. Weapon systems fired randomly or shut down completely.
Admiral.
The fleet is retreating, Admiral Kekstar announced with disbelief. Nexer ships are jumping to hyperspace in all directions. They appear to be fleeing the system. Dr. Unikim quietly began packing her research materials into her travel bag. Her work was finished. The hybrid plants would continue growing in the station's botanical gardens. But they were no longer needed for military purposes. How did you know it would work? Kestar asked when he found her in the agricultural bay. Una paused in her packing to consider the question seriously. Every ecosystem exists in a state of balance. The Nexer machines had become very successful predators by learning to adapt to any threat they encountered. But predators can become prey when the environment changes. She gestured toward the small earth flowers growing among the alien specimens. These plants carry genetic memories of a world where survival required constant adaptation. They learned to produce chemical compounds that could disrupt any biological system that tried to exploit them. But the Nexer are machines, not biological organisms. They use biological components to interface with conquered worlds, Una explained patiently. Their programming required them to understand biological systems by simulating them. When they tried to simulate Earth biology, they essentially infected themselves with genetic instructions they could not properly process. General Thulmer shook his head in amazement. You defeated the most powerful fleet in known space using flowers. I reminded them that every ecosystem has rules, Una corrected gently. The Nexer forgot that successful predators must respect the balance of their environment. When they tried to consume something that had learned to fight back, they discovered that even machines can be part of the food chain. Commander Park approached carrying Una's travel bag and personal effects. The transport ship is ready for departure. Earth Command wants a full debriefing within 72 hours. As they walked through the corridors of Omega Prime toward the docking bays, alien crew members stopped to stare at the small human scientist who had saved their station. Word had spread quickly through the various species communication networks. Dr. Unikim was no longer seen as a harmless botanist asking innocent questions about plants, but she still moved through the corridors with the same gentle demeanor she had shown since arriving. She nodded politely to everyone she passed and paused to thank the Sylvanian gardeners for their help with her research. Will we see you again? Groundskeeper Velian asked as they passed the botanical gardens. Perhaps Una replied with a warm smile. There is always more to learn about how life adapts to new challenges. At the docking bay, Admiral Kekstar and General Thulmer waited to see her off. Both military leaders looked at the human scientists with expressions that mixed gratitude with something approaching fear. The intelligence files about your previous operations, Admiral Kekstar said carefully. Are they all accurate? Military reports tend to focus on results rather than methods, Una replied diplomatically. I prefer to think of myself as someone who helps life find a way to flourish in difficult circumstances, by destroying entire enemy fleets. By reminding ecosystems of their natural balance, she corrected gently. Violence is rarely necessary when you understand how everything connects to everything else. As the human transport ship prepared for departure, Unikim took one last look at the space station that had become her temporary home. Through the observation windows, She could see alien species working together to repair the minor damage from the brief battle. The gardens on level 7 were already showing new growth from the hybrid plant specimens she had created. Life was finding a way to flourish, just as it always did. Commander Park settled into the seat beside her as their ship departed Omega Prime and set course for Earth. "Do you ever regret the path you chose?" he asked quietly. Yuna was quiet for a long moment as she watched the stars wheel past outside their window. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of years and the memory of a burning world. "Every garden grows from fertile soil," she said softly. "The people who died at Harmony Colony and all the other worlds helped teach me that life is worth protecting. They make sure their sacrifice helps new life flourish instead of just feeding more death." She touched the small memorial pin she wore. On her civilian jacket, it bore the names of 3,000 colonists who had died when she was 12 years old. "Every ecosystem has a balance. I just make sure that balance favors those who choose to nurture life rather than destroy it." Their ship jumped to hyperspace, carrying Ghost Orchid home to Earth. Behind them, the various species of the Galactic Defense Council began updating their intelligence files on humanity. They were finally beginning to understand that Earth had not survived by being the strongest or most numerous species in the galaxy. Humanity had survived by learning to weaponize life itself across the galaxy. Military commanders of various species received new intelligence reports about the Battle of Omega Prime. The reports described how a human botanist had defeated the unstoppable Nexer horde using nothing more than flower seeds and an understanding of biological systems. Most of the commanders filed the reports under impossible, but confirmed. A few began quietly reviewing their own defensive strategies, wondering what other, seemingly harmless human civilians might actually be weapons in disguise. And in the depths of space, the scattered remnants of the Nexer horde drifted between the stars. Their collective intelligence had been shattered by something as simple as pollen carried on an artificial breeze. They would eventually recover their individual ship functions, but they would never again trust their ability to adapt to biological threats. They had learned, too late, that some flowers have very sharp thorns. Dr. Unikim returned to her quiet life on Earth, tending gardens and teaching students about the interconnected nature of all living systems. She never spoke publicly about her military activities, preferring to let others tell the stories of Ghost Orchid's impossible victories. But sometimes, when she worked among her flowers in the memorial gardens dedicated to the victims of human alien conflicts, visitors would notice her gentle smile and wonder what secrets lay hidden behind those quiet eyes. The answer was simple, though few would understand it. She had learned that every war was really just a question of understanding the ecosystem, and she had never met an ecosystem that could not be improved by planting the right seeds in the right places at the right time. The universe was vast and full of predators who thought they understood the rules of survival. Ghost Orchid was always ready to teach them that they were wrong.